Welcome back. Residents in Alexandra have accused the City of Johannesburg of embezzling funds meant to address a housing crisis. Now, earlier this week, the city evicted occupants from containers it provided during the COVID-19 pandemic. The containers were set up to mitigate the pandemic by moving people out of densely populated areas in Alexandra. That's when we were talking about social distancing. But when no one was moved, some residents occupied those containers. For more on this story, we're joined this afternoon by the director, or a director, in the City of Johannesburg's Human Settlements Department. Charles Cilliers, thanks very much indeed for coming on. I want to get some clarity from you because there have been plenty of discussions on other platforms as well about exactly what has happened here. So how much money has actually gone into this project by the City of Johannesburg?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I work in the MMC or Human Settlements Office, so we provide political oversight to the department.
Okay.
And this is a project that long predates us being in office. We've been there for about a year. And this, as you said, this occurred during 2020, during the de-densification idea. And I've had to read a lot of reports and try to familiarize myself with the information here because it's quite confusing, because I think a lot of what happened back then was happening in quite a frantic state. There was a lot of panic, as I'm sure you'll remember. And the buzzword at the time was, we have to just get people to social distance. So a lot of these things were built at, using emergency procurement regulations. And what we ended up with was not as many containers as the city had planned to build. I think we ended up with, I've actually got one report here in front of me that says that, there were 3 different locations built, and the one now where the people were put out of, there's 172 that were ended up there. There were supposed to be 594 originally. And at another 2 locations, you've got 440 and 520 respectively. And around, before we even came into the department, the city had spent around 500 million rand building these containers, which was much higher than anyone had anticipated at the time. And unfortunately, they haven't been used because they didn't finish it in time to use the emergency procurement all the way through. So then they had to go and finish it using standard procurement rules. And we're kind of left with many of these units not having electricity, not having water, and not being habitable. I've been to the site myself. I was there a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of contractors there finishing the jobs, putting in pipes, putting in the electricity. And then at that point, allocations are going to occur, and people are going to be put into these units to live there.
So Charles, I'm just trying to understand the numbers. So, in July 2020, the city, the Metro earmarked 500 million to roll out this project. Has all of that money been used, or in the pipeline of being used?
Yeah, I think it was actually even more than that was earmarked for it, because I think that in the end they wanted to build as many as 2,468. Those are the numbers that I have,
right,
that were actually going to be built. When you look at the plans back then, I think they were very ambitious in what they were trying to do. Perhaps we felt inspired by how quickly China was able to build like an entire hospital within a few weeks, right? So maybe we were trying to emulate that, but procurement and delivery in South Africa works a little bit more slowly. We're not a single party state where everybody, whatever the government says, just goes and nobody questions it. In this country, you just end up with all sorts of hurdles that you have to jump through at every turn if you want to do anything. So we've ended up with far fewer of these containers than we had in mind, but we're at the point now where we're just trying to make the best of it and try and put them to some good use.
Right. Far fewer than the containers that you had in mind. And 500 million rand is a heck of a lot of money. I just wonder in reality, whether all of the money has indeed gone to this project as planned?
Yeah, I mean, it raises really uncomfortable questions, because if you divide the number of units by how much money was spent, you get to amounts that are in excess of what it would cost to build an RDP house, for example. And here we're talking about container units that should have cost 60,000 Rand, and they're costing, I think, I don't know, we can do the maths quickly, but I think it's upwards of 400,000 a unit, right? So this was subjected to investigations, and it's one of those scenarios where, mistakes were made, but nobody in particular is being held responsible for it. And I guess people are being given allowances for the fact that the whole world was losing its mind during 2020.
Wait, hold on. You said 60,000 Rand, and then you mentioned 400,000 Rand. Can you just clarify those two numbers for me again?
Well, I mean, if you add up what was spent versus the number of units that we got, then it adds up to a lot more than 60,000 a unit, doesn't it?
I see. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't imagine that a container, even if it is connected to services like electricity and water, is going to cost almost 500,000 Rand each.
It shouldn't. I mean, I think if we had to do this again, without the call it the panic of the COVID time, I mean, I'm sure you could produce homes at a much more competitive rate than we ended up doing here. And when I say we, I mean the city.
Right.
As I said, I wasn't there. My MMC wasn't there.
Okay. So what happens now in terms of oversight, right? Because we need answers about where the money has gone, and if indeed it's gone into these houses. Can we see the invoices? Can we see the job cards? Can we get clarity on where all of this money has gone? And then go take a look at those different sites, those 3 different locations that you mentioned. And actually go and see for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you. As the MMC's office and other councillors in the city, I think that it remains open to questioning. And of course, we have a responsibility to give ratepayers value for money.
Yeah.
And my MMC has got a zero tolerance approach to corruption. I mean, it may be that no corruption occurred here, but there's questions that have to be answered, because on the face of it, it didn't go according to plan.
Yeah, if it walks like a duck, though, Charles, the numbers just absolutely don't make sense. And for me, it feels like having that kind of oversight, taking a look at the numbers, going to visit the sites, that should be an easy enough exercise for us to try and get some answers here. You mentioned the chaos of COVID-19, and absolutely, we don't have to cast our minds back to what an incredible time that was, not only here at home, but around the world. But it was also an opportunity, as we've seen through many reports by the SIU, to loot and to steal food parcels from the poor. And I suppose it's with that kind of gaze that we need to investigate projects of this nature.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that this is a festering sore for the society as to how much was actually misappropriated during that time. Because when you use disaster or emergency procurement, you're really relying on people to make the right decisions and not to see it as a free-for-all and as a feeding frenzy. But unfortunately, as we've seen from what the SIU has told us, the temptation was just too great for many public officials.